Hello and welcome to another edition of As the Blade Turns. I am Dave Leese, and this is our waiting for the CAS arbitrators to decide edition. It feels almost like the OJ jury just went out, and we are all sitting in the courtroom waiting to hear what happens next. Perhaps Kyle Richards is there. Perhaps Kris Jenner, and we are all just sitting and waiting to hear what the jury will come back with. But as we are doing this, there are many important updates that we need to discuss and have conversations about. One thing is how closely tied the Olympics are into Russian nationalism, which when we do discuss, sometimes we get angry comments that this is not the Soviet times, and you have to wonder at what degree this is just merely semantics, because there are now large banners of Kamila Valieva being hung in Moscow supporting her. And while that is lovely to support a young athlete, I think you are seeing how closely tied this is into nationalism. I would imagine if a 15-year-old American figure skater were taking a banned substance and this came out. Would they be considered a beacon of innocence and hope? The Russian Figure Skating Federation put out a image of Kamila Valieva with angel wings on her back. But you have to wonder, imagine this were an American figure skater or a Canadian figure skater. How would the media be covering them? Would their house be swarmed by reporters? And would it be favorable or unfavorable to them as the details started to emerge? You really do have to wonder that. There are also paid social media posts being on Instagram and other platforms, and they have the ya and we, Eteri Tutberidze, which is I/we, Eteri Tutberidze. They don't use the to be verb there. So it's interesting to see how tied in, and that's something that is used in other ways in Russian to really talk about the support of Eteri Tutberidze. So many people have called me to say, do you think that this is the end of Eteri? I believe she is far too important to Russian sports and as high up as this goes to really ever have her in trouble. I mean, the degrees in Russia and Russian sports, if you watched Icarus, the implication was that the money for doping went all the way to the Kremlin. But let's just play a game how close everyone is to the Kremlin in Russian figure skating. Eteri Tutberidze's athlete, Alena Zagitova, is in a show of Tatiana Navka. Tatiana Navka is married to Dmitry Peskov, who is Putin's press secretary. So you could just see that the degrees are not actually that far between Russian figure skating and how tied in this actually goes. Tatiana Navka's show was able to perform during the pandemic, when it was even wondered if audiences were going to be able to be held at certain times. So, there are certain aspects of this that we just have to remain aware of. But for today's show, I really wanted to talk about Dr. Shvetsky. Dr. Filipp Shvetsky is becoming a ubiquitous figure. We have discussed him a bit over the last several years. We have often implied, suggested, questioned, why is this man at the boards? He is an anesthesiologist. What purpose is he at a figure skating competition, and why is he sitting there? Obviously, this has all played out beautifully for reporters if they knew how to dig. Could you imagine if this dawned when Christine Brennan will start to realize that Dr. Shvetsky, the man who likely gave Kamila Valieva the drugs, was in the kiss and cry box for Team Russia. During the team event, the Russian pair, Mishin and Galyamov, had a bad fall that would likely result in concussion protocol in the United States unless someone wanted to be sued for that. The doctor was never shown checking them for concussions at this time. So that is just something interesting to put into perspective. This is a doctor who had rowing Olympians banned in 2008. Could you imagine if someone had a job where they had people banned from the Olympics, an embarrassment to their country, and their country is on thin ice with the IOC. This is obviously right before these things were taking, but still, this many people got banned because of actions that this doctor took and drugs that he administered to the rowing team. Do you think that that doctor would then be hired again and again to work with other athletes? And why are they seeing an anesthesiologist? You know, I understand seeing someone from your back. I understand seeing a masseuse. I mean, this is an interesting thing, but, you know, Western, Eastern medicine, there's always the debates about who is going to help you, especially in sports. It's always hard to find doctors who really work with athletes and understand the loads. There is, you know, the theory that, you know, some doctors, you know, don't have knowledge of sports. So if you see them, they just want to put you in a cast or take you out of competition. So you really need a doctor who can have knowledge of your training and then work with your training to understand. Obviously, you run into problems like where you get specialists like Larry Nassar who can then take advantage of that situation, because this is a very esoteric world. But as you start to see, why is Dr. Shvetsky so ubiquitous at figure skating competitions? Dr. Shvetsky is also the doctor who is tied into Nina Mosher. And Nina Mosher, in the Russian structure of funding, was tied to both Bobrova's Ice Dancers and to Sambo 70. So this has been going on for several years. In 2016, when meldonium had been banned, and certain athletes like Maria Sharapova and Ekaterina Bobrova tested positive for taking this drug after it had been banned, Dr. Shvetsky was the one who actually administered this drug to Ekaterina Bobrova at the 2016 European Figure Skating Championships. That was then, she had been suspended by the ISU, and then it was later overturned. As we have said, Russia is extremely powerful within the ISU. The thought at the time, it was a new drug, maybe they didn't have enough warning, or maybe they just kept taking it. You have to wonder. There are also people that like to do a before and after of how beneficial that drug is. At the time, we were told it's just a blood vessel. It's just a vitamin for the blood vessels. But I would look at, you know, the performances of athletes. Tuktamisheva is the one who admitted that she was taking it throughout the 2014-2015 season. But we don't know that she and others weren't taking it for years prior. It is reported that it is the drug that Russian athletes were taking at the 2014 Olympic Games when they gave such amazing performances there. So these are all things to really wonder about, because Tuktamisheva, it took years for her to regain that level of performance after she performed at 2014-2015. Now, we're not saying that that drug is the only reason that she did well. You have to wonder about, when you are performing that well, that dominantly, what kind of impact does that have on your body? Are there residual injuries that come from the amount that you were able to train and the amount that you were able to compete and push yourself, you know, that entire season or for years prior? At some point, you know, things do catch up with your body. The body, you know, can only take so much pounding. We do see the shortened careers of Team Tutberidze. And people always wonder, do they want to have older athletes? Well, they have younger ones who are there to take their places. So it's not necessarily a happy topic, but it is what it is in the realities of Russian figure skating. But let's talk about Dr. Shvetsky, because this is really something interesting to discuss. We have a situation where Sportschau, who helped break this case about Kamila Valieva, is now talking about the Valieva case. Help from an inert gas doping specialist. This is an article from February 13th, 2022, 2:35 p.m. German time. In Beijing, 3 sports judges are currently assessing the doping case of Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva. She is looked after by a merciless grinder and a doping-experienced doctor. When the starting list for the women's figure skating short program was released in Beijing on Sunday, the Russian world still seemed fine. At the bottom, 5 digits before the end, was the name of the girl who had managed to attract the attention of the world public in many ways in the last few days, with a sensational performance in the team competition and a positive doping test. Kamila Valieva, 15 years old. Research by the Sports Show on the young women's environment reveals a fateful mixture of an extremely tough trainer and a doctor who has repeatedly proven in the past to go beyond the borders of the gray areas. By the way, as I read that paragraph, I just want to point out that it sounds almost exactly like the way that the Karolyi Ranch was discussed in the U.S., a situation that is rife for abuse. In terms of America, it resulted in sexual abuse. I think here we were resulting in doping abuse. It does seem like there are certain elements that are present in certain environments where when the abuse is so physical, so mental, so emotional, that these other more heinous abuses can start to happen. And I think you can see a clear relation of a slippery slope and why athletes need to be protected. And this is something that I think the International Olympic Committee needs to take a hard look at if the Olympics are to be sustainable in the future. Because I believe it does seem that if you look at these big scandals that are enveloping the sports, and not just a random sport, it's not just like something happening in curling. These are the marquee sports of the Olympic Games involving the major countries. The major countries in the Olympic movement who are funding it and providing the dollars. When you look at China, Russia, and the United States with the USA gymnastics team, you have to wonder if these scandals are happening to the biggest countries. What is this all about? And does this put the Olympics in danger? Because it's not happening slowly. Look, 2016, you have Russian doping and you have Larry Nassar at the same time. Now we move forward, and I've always said figure skating and gymnastics is ostensibly the same sport. Well, look at what is happening in another situation in this way. It seems that the environments are so similar and that this behavior is so pervasive. You have to wonder about what other kinds of abuse we don't even know about. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I say that to use critical thinking. Are these athletes being protected from other sorts of abuse? I think before 2016, if you were to ask, are these athletes being protected from sexual abuse at the Crowley Ranch? You would say, of course, they have other adults there. Well, we later learn about parties that the adults are having while this doctor is seeing girls alone in their cabins at the ranch. I think you'd have to wonder about what kind of dangers, Russian figure skaters could be exploited to. It's just food for thought. No accusations being made, but it is something that I think we all need to think about in terms of how protected are these young athletes. The article continues, CIS decides on Monday. Despite the official list, it was rather uncertain whether Russia's great figure skating talent Valieva would actually be allowed to start in the individual competition on Tuesday. At the same time, an Italian, an American, and a Slovenian met to decide the latest twist in the Valieva case for the World Arbitration Court for Sport, CAS. Fabio Judica, Jeffrey Benz, and Vesna Bergant Rokovic, sorry, I cannot pronounce that, silently marched past 30 waiting journalists into the hearing room on Sunday. Valieva was connected there via video. We're all preparing for a long night, said CAS Secretary General Matthew Reeb. The verdict will be announced on Monday. I have to say, you have to really wonder what impact is this going to have even on Valieva's state. At a certain point, the stress, the distraction of competition, what does this athlete even know or not know about what's going on? Does she have her cell phone? We don't even know if she really even runs her own Instagram account while she's at the Olympics. There was an account run by her aunt where there was incredibly racist rhetoric written. Message was later changed. You just have to really wonder, what does this young athlete know? And what is this doing to her head as all of the attention is swirling around her? And what is she being told by the people who are coaching her, who are leading her at these Olympics? You really do have to feel for her and her life. Obviously, she's being supported in Moscow as an angel. You see that rhetoric. I do believe that her life, in some respects, will be okay in the sense that she will likely have favorable books, favorable television interviews and specials, and likely endorsements will still continue for her. And I believe that she will likely be a figure in Russian sports. But depending on how this situation turns out, you have to wonder, what does it mean for her sports career? What does this mean for her life? What does this mean for everything going forward? Because this will be attached to her for the rest of her life. And it's perhaps not her fault that it all is. People have asked, what about the parents of the kids that go into these environments? It was brought up in USA Gymnastics. What about the parents there? I think that the lawyer for the Nassar victims did a very good job of eschewing any responsibility away and really kept the focus on the doctor and USA Gymnastics itself. But you do have to wonder, about complicity. Are we all complicit when we watch these Russian figure skaters and don't ask tough questions? To say anything is to invoke backlash. And I think we even have to look at, Ted Barton recently deleting his Twitter account because he and his complicity in promoting this brand of Team Tutberidze over the last several years, perhaps for his own personal gain, if you are part of that theory, or is he just enamored with Eteri? The jury is out on that. Prohibited infusions. It continues. This is where the article gets really interesting. The task of the referees is to check whether Russia's anti-doping agency, RUSADA, has rightly lifted Valieva's temporary one-day ban. The day after her gold medal in the team competition, the analysis result of a doping sample taken on December 25th revealed a positive finding for the banned substance trimetazidine. Both the IOC, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and the International Skating Federation had appealed against the CAS. The young Russian is threatened by the people closest to her coach Eteri Tutberidze, and her team doctor, Filipp Shvetsky. It goes to say Dr. Shvetsky was banned from sport for several years for administering doping. Before the Summer Games in Beijing in 2008, he had given rowers banned infusions and even made a confession. Since 2010, he has been the team doctor time and again. During this period, other Russian figure skaters also had positive doping tests. That is true, and it's interesting to see which athletes are protected and which ones aren't. If you read Grigory Rodchenkov's book, he would talk about certain athletes being tossed aside as sacrificial lambs, and I think you have to wonder. Maria Sutskova was banned for a diuretic recently, and was essentially thrown to the wolves as a bad girl. Why wasn't she protected like Kamila Valieva? Why wasn't she protected like Ekaterina Bobrova? I think you really have to wonder. Her drug for weight loss, not as severe as what we were talking about with trimetazidine. Why was that such a problem? Why is she having such a harsh penalty? Why is she not being protected in Russian media as someone who is, an innocent person here? It just makes you wonder about who has protective status, who doesn't. Again, I certainly don't think that this is the end of Eteri Tutberidze as a top Russian figure skating coach based on the evidence that we are seeing. But let's continue, because this is where the article gets really rather shocking. It continues under the headline, "The Doping Wonder Drug Xenon." A patent that Shvetsky registered with colleagues in Moscow after research by the sports show shows how willing to experiment Shvetsky goes into gray areas of the anti-doping area and beyond. The anesthesiologist Shvetsky and his colleagues wanted to patent a special method for using the noble gas xenon, its use by top athletes. Miraculously, the authors claimed in their paper that the method was legal. It leads to a feeling of flying, joy, relaxation, increased blood testosterone levels, and concentration. It had been suggested for several years that figure skaters may have been given testosterone to be able to do the quads, especially as they were young teenagers. And I think we're seeing now that perhaps it's more sophisticated, where this testosterone could be something that is being given through other means, other drugs. The article continues, "One thing is clear, a doping effect. Shvetsky and colleagues wanted to push athletes beyond their limits with the use of gas." And again, top secret, in 2016, the method was scientifically recognized and published in Russia. As early as 2014, ARD had reported on the use of the noble gas xenon on hundreds of Russian athletes from a number of sports. The method, said Cologne University professor Mario Devis from the Institute of Biochemistry at the Sports University, increased the production of erythropoietin by a factor of 1.6 to 160% within 24 hours. The result, a few months after the ARD report, xenon gas was added to WADA's banned list, and application to the athletes thus fulfilled the definition of doping. Doping allegations against coach Tutberidze, of course they do it. The Russian figure skaters have been under the command of success-obsessed coach Eteri Tutberidze for years. From the close environment of Russian figure skating, the sports show learned that pillboxes, allegedly with vitamin preparations, were available at training camps under their direction. However, the athletes were not told exactly what means these were. That's interesting, because if you ever read articles that discuss Romanian gymnasts and other Russian and Soviet gymnasts from years past, from the 1970s, from the 1980s, they often talk about being given supplements but not being told what they were actually being given. There are many people that are saying, but she's 15, wouldn't she know? Well, imagine if you're being given supplements every day of your life from the time that you're 10. At what point are you going to question? At what point does the realization come? I think there are people very angry that, sport is being tainted, and they want to put the onus on whoever they can. I think someone like Maria Sharapova taking a medication is much different than someone when they are 10. But we are also talking about brainwashing and being part of a system that happens. And at what point, do ethics and morals become compromised? We all have seen, I think, different documentaries. There's documentaries about how white lies become big lies, how little, taking a little substance here and there becomes taking big, substances. At what point does this start so early and then the ethics of athletes are compromised? I think that is a really big question that no one has really talked about. It's clear that doping is cheating, but, who is to blame? And I think it really has to be looked at from the top down. But unfortunately, the athletes are the ones who wind up taking the fall for this. When we see this happen, it's the athlete who is typically banned, perhaps within the system. The doctor or whoever was in charge of doping control is one that actually perhaps may get in trouble for it. If you read Grigory Rodchenkov's book, he would talk about how sophisticated the doping was, that in his job, he was working, with the doctors to give certain drugs to athletes that wouldn't be actually found on doping tests. So if you watch Icarus, the Russian anti-doping agency wasn't working to find drugs and punish athletes who were doping. They were working to find drugs that athletes could take to enhance their performance and later evade doping tests. Is that what is going on here? This is a routine argument that has been made, but Valieva was found clean at the Olympics. Her test was clean. Well, was she clean? Or was it not found this time? And I think that these are real questions. What about the other girls? Their tests were clean. Again, are they really clean? Or were these drugs not found? People have talked about using furosemide to wash out other drugs that are in one system so they cannot be found on doping tests. I think these are much bigger questions that we all have to grapple with. So I do want to have everyone, have this food for thought. Yes, it's a trace amount of a drug, TMZ. Why was this drug in Kamila Valieva's system to begin with? And who gave her this drug? I think that's where the focus needs to be at the top. And if someone at your job continued to mess up and to cause serious career harm to so many athletes year after year after year after year, why is the same person being hired back? You have to remember that this is a doctor that is ultimately hired by the federation. Why is the federation paying for a doctor that had rowers banned, that gave Bobrova meldonium at the 2016 European Figure Skating Championships, and this is someone that they allow at the boards? This is someone they allow at the box at the Olympics? And why is the doctor who's supposed to protect the health of the athletes, maybe a back injury, maybe a knee injury, maybe a broken foot, you would think, okay, an orthopedist. No, who do they have at the boards? They have an anesthesiologist. These are big, huge red flags, and perhaps this is something that the world will start to be paying attention to in the next weeks, because the footage is all there. Think of how many times you've seen Dr. Filipp Shvetsky at the boards, at figure skating competitions, at the World Championships, at the Olympics. He is right there at the boards for these skaters. Why is he there? What don't we even know about yet? Thanks. We'll be watching.